Alright. So, after quitting Path of Exile 2 because the endgame in that game is really, really badly balanced, like...
I'm not ready!
Anyway, GGG have come out with an event where Path of Exile 1 is going to become even less balanced, and that's a good thing because it means we get to play around with 19 new ascendancies, and the one we're going for is Gambler. Fitting for me because I just quit online gambling because I want to save more money, so I'm going to do all my gambling in Path of Exile now. You have to do these ascendancies in PoB via a jewel, so there's a jewel socket on all the trees. Like there's like 3 different kinds of endgamey kind of endgame, 3 like loadout trees, and there's in the config there's extra passive points to account for the fact that this isn't actually a jewel socket we're taking in the build. I should account for the fact I'm not taking the 10 dexterity either. Numbers. This is Frostblade of Katabasis, duelist man, gambler man. Look at him. Doesn't he look like a lucky man? Ironically, I would say this is probably one of the safer ideas you can go for, even though you're playing gambler. This idea is mainly based on the popularity of Frostblades of Katabasis Phrecia. And I note in there's a load of notes in this. I like doing notes in my PoB, so you've got a load of notes. And the main thing to talk about first is what are we losing from not being Slayer? Because that's where we took the build, where I took the build when I was making it. And the main thing we lose is Masterful Form in Ruthless. Obviously, this doesn't give even +1 Frenzy in Ruthless, but the effect itself is really cool still, because you would stack Frenzy charges with Ice Bite for loads of flat cold, and then you get Endurance charges as well. It's a great defensive layer. We don't get that unless you're somehow able to get both Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame Jewels in Ruthless in a month-long league, not counting on it. Even in a regular league, wouldn't be counting on it. So, by losing that, we have to think, okay, how are we actually solving our defenses as a gambler? And what we're going for is a lot of block with Savalin, investing into even extra block on top of that with Lucky Block, which we can then combo with Risky Exploit, which gives us a 50% chance for our elemental resistances to count as 90. So we have these chance-based layers, and you can get unlucky and just get bonked through them, but most of the time you're going to be either blocking all your damage or reducing it dramatically after that. And this is something we can stack as well with when we go out to the endgame setup, because this DPS is these items. I've got these in Ruthless before. Don't be scared about the Yoke of Suffering. But if we just take it down and then look how much our DPS goes down without our cool items and stuff. We can take Kilowava's Bluster. This is a really common shield. This is people have been talking about this already being a big synergy, because this must stack into a 90% chance. So a 90% chance to get 90% elemental resistances. So again, there's a 1 in 10 chance you get hit like you have 75% res. It's not like you don't have any res. This also comes with some chance to avoid elemental ailments, which is really good for risk aversion. Just combo that with a bit of stuff we take on the tree, and you can easily get to 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments. This character, as you saw here, down in this DPS is variable. It doesn't include Cull here, and then you can do things like you can take Val Smite for more flat damage. I like this tech. I've seen people use this before. Val Smite's fun. We don't really have another Val skill unless you want to use Val Multi-Skill. And well, our other fun buttons is Tincture. Even with a smaller mana pool, you can sustain this for a while. The mana burn isn't that harsh, and it will drop, but it's burst. It's a burst tool. That's fine. This is enough damage to do most of your Atlas proc and stuff. You're not going to delete the end game, but you're going to be able to survive comfortably enough and deal with everything to farm up for the items that you want to turn this build from good into crazy. When we get Heat Shiver, we can farm up a Savalin, how do you even pronounce this thing? Yoke of Suffering is the most endgame item. Again, don't be scared by these items. The taming is fully you can get these rings. Bottled, this is just a me. Just it's oh, more damage. I can use a flash slot for more damage. It's not even needed. So the identity of this build, why are we going crit? We don't go crit to start. To go to the non-crit loadout, this is like what you're like going towards. You probably don't reach level 89 before you swap to crit. You really do want to swap to crit ASAP. We level with precise technique, and we don't take any crit stuff at first with that. There's all sorts of leveling trees here we can go over in later. The thing about ailments in this build, the thing about Gambler and ailments fun is Gambler gets a big chance to deal triple damage alongside a decent chance to deal double damage. You know, the 25% less damage does knock that down slightly, but it's still like a large multiplier. This node alone, like in terms of raw damage over time, average it out, it's like 16 to 70% more damage, like 16.7 or something. The real advantage of triple damage, though, isn't the overall average DPS you're dealing, it's these individual hits you're going to get, which are going to give you big freezes, and later on with Yoke of Suffering, really big shocks as well. That's quite exciting. And obviously those things don't have that much duration, so we want a skill that attacks fast enough so we can more regularly get that 15% chance for a big hit. You have an option as well. You can go for even juicier hits with Ruthless. You can, if you want more consistency, swap this for something else. Nor the fact that Behead is considered, as I'm peer being for low life punishment. So that's why you want to drop. You want to go precise technique at first because it's the best form of damage scaling an attack build has early on. But after that, you want to drop it so you can get crit chance, because critical strikes inherently afflict ailments. Going non-crit means you have to take some chance for it, and it's just not going to be as consistent. There's a really good cold mastery here, which you can take. If you're running, like, if you find some pain seekers, these tend to be not like too rare. They're pretty common gloves. So you can use these to juice your ailments even more and get those bigger freezes to use this, or you can just keep this as 40% fizz converted to cold. It's not as exciting, but it'll mean you're doing 100% cold damage with Frostblades, so if you have like a higher fizz DPS weapon, if that's what you're able to get, rather than just like a bunch of flat LE damage, you know, there's lots of different logical ways you would take this build as you're leveling it. Which makes it very fitting for Ruthless, because it's going to depend on the kind of gear you drop. We got recombinators for building a really nice sword up. You see this is like just an eternal sword. It's not like any boosted kind of crit stuff. That's a jeweled foil. So in terms of like early on, like this build doesn't need any uniques to function. This is just really good alongside Gambler's Bow. You want this, but it's not like the build doesn't function without it, which is ideal. You don't want any essential uniques for builds. Duresso's Salute, also really, really nice to grab. It's just an all-round good melee amulet. You got the Pain Seekers there, and these are completely optional. You can just like wear whatever. Prompt Interrogation was something I was testing. Doesn't really work well with the build. You have to run like Black Flame, which also is in here, but like it's better to run the Taming later on with like a proper like ring. Proper ring that I'm doing the mouse thing again. Proper ring that has a bunch of stats that you want. That's a general like overview. Also, like, why are we playing Frostblades of Katabasis and not Lightning Strike? That's basically just because I don't want to play Lightning Strike. I've already played it once, like, ages ago on, like, I think it was Scourge League. I played Lightning Strike. It was fun. I had my fun with it. I don't want to play the skill again. I don't like the whole positioning game. The funny thing about this, though, if I go into the endgame DPS setup and just go into here, and I just, like, add on, like, Lightning Strike here. It's like regular. It's not even add on Val Lightning Strike. Let's enable it. Let's make it... Doesn't need to be 20 quality. If I just swap to this, you'll notice it deals slightly more damage. And technically it deals much more damage because the projectile hits can also hit as if you're aligning yourself correctly with the boss, with the +1 strikes and stuff. So if you want to juice your damage versus like pinnacles and stuff, when you get to that point, you can just actually just throw on a high level Lightning Strike and use that instead for bossing. Frostblades of Katabasis is just way better for clear because of its ability to shotgun with melee splash. I'm not going to like throw in a clip from the Rutu video here, but I would just go and watch, go give his channel. I don't know if he has. It's his video or someone made a video of him streaming about it or something. But like, go search Rutu Frostblade's video if you don't know what I'm talking about. Frostblades basically is a melee strike skill that almost is like an area of effect skill because it has such a long range and gives you this wide rectangle. The rectangle of it hits everything. It doesn't just hit the enemy 6 meters away. Where is it? You know, plus 6 meters to melee. It's more than 6 meters. It's got a massive range. I mean, like, this is where is it? Why does that say that? Oh, it's because I was doing this. I was testing some other stuff. Melee. This is my melee build. This is my attack range. But if you know the skill, you know this already. This isn't news to you. And if you don't know the skill, like, watch someone play. It's a really fun concept. So you can hit anything, but everything like basically between that target and you and kind of like around that target is also going to get hit by the area of the strike. They get struck as well by the strike as if they're getting targeted by it. And then they all trigger melee splash, which is why you can hit a pack of like 7 enemies and get 49 hits with one hit, with one attack, which is why instant leech is like really cool here and why like, I'm just taking these points for it. There's other nodes you can take for instant leech, but they're not as, we're not going this way, so we don't take this. So instant leech with this build is actually really good, and you can get like, you should, even if you get like bonked down through your block and stuff, one attack into a pack should just like full health. That's cool. And also like I've never actually played Frostblades. I kind of like cold strikes in general. I played Glacial Hammer of Shattering, but didn't like the free hit mechanic much. Cold and chill and freeze is really nice defensively, and you get Herald of Ice Shatters, which is really nice, like, both defensively and aesthetically. ASMR. Let's go off the. Let's just stay on the map. Let's. This is the aspirational stuff. I don't want to distract people too much with this who want to play this. Like, this is more like, you know, you get like 500,000 comfortably, and then you can go that further with like prismatic tincture. And this is not like a fixed number as well, because you can get like this is a low ball sword. This is like a 1-out sword. You can get better swords. You can get much better swords. It's on a 5-link though. Auras for this build. I'm just running Herald of Ice with Tempest Shield. Tempest Shield's there for spell block more than anything else because we don't need the shock immunity, but 25% chance to block spell damage is worth the mana we're using, especially when we get to Savalin. We'll use it for that. And yeah, precision. So we're not taking any like reduced mana reservation on the endgame tree. It's partly because we're not really near any of it. It's like charisma's over here. This is probably the closest bit, but it's like an extra travel node. This sucks. And then yeah, it's hard to take anything else, but we don't need it. Like, this build doesn't benefit from running hatred because of the way they reworked hatred. It's not like we're converting physical damage into Ellie. We're just stacking flat elemental damage. And so anger and wrath are also not really worth their cost. So these auras are just like, I think that this is just everything. We put points elsewhere. You can fiddle with this tree and find better things if you want. I like this build as well because we're going to run Consecrated Path again. We actually get a real movement skill-ish. You know, you can't freely move around with it, but you can just blink through packs. And the damage in the endgame build for Consecrated Path is going to be pretty good as well, so this will just kill stuff anyway. You can just like, almost like a one, it's just like faster attacks for like making it faster. And it's going to be very fast. Fast Consecrated Path. Battle Smite is just there. We don't care about Smite. Smite does give us a buff. Battle Smite gives us a slightly better buff. You can use Smite as well, technically. But just like, you know, Smite is going to have a very fast attack speed as well. Right. It comes out very fast, so you can just use this every now and then to give you the buff. Regular buff lasts 4 seconds. The reason why Battle Smite is nice is because it lasts 8 seconds. You can use it every now and then. It's going to give you Gives you some base chance to shock as well, which is quite nice, especially when before you go crit. Like, this is good to get even like before you go crit. And we can get power charge and critical here. This is not our power charge generation. We have Assassin's Mark for when we go crit. Power charge and critical just means we can generate power charges more often when we're mapping, rather than having to rely on it proccing off killing rares and stuff, which is probably going to be enough. We might as well just put this on here anyway. And multi-shell automation, and then like ice golem with cast and damage taken, partly because I was getting a bit greedy with hit chance. There might be better ways to solve accuracy than this, but it's, you know, it's nice to have a friend. Low level cast and damage taken, high level multi-shell automation. And then for this, like, this kind of setup you could do before you get Svalin with cast when damage taken. When you get Svalin, this will trigger elemental spells on block. It has a very low cooldown, which means that these spells, when you have a low mana pool, could gut your mana pool, but Cold Snap has a cooldown, so we shouldn't be able to just trigger that endlessly. It should have to go through its cooldown, as far as I'm aware. Please someone correct me if I'm wrong. And we can put Bone Chill on this and Culling Strike, so when it procs, you know, we don't get, it's not going to be like absolute 10% cull, so this is like slightly misleading, but it's, you know, it's going to rock regularly, so it's going to cull stuff for us to some degree. Bone Shield gives another like 7% DPS. The area. One of the downsides of playing this build as a crit build is you kind of invalidate, when you're bossing, the melee strike range that you have, you're not going to make as much use of, because you want to be close to do Bone Chill, Cold Snap. And we're also running Brittle Boots later on, so you can use the unique mod with these. Technically, you don't really need it while mapping. So the unique version mod that gives more duration. I can't spell. Yeah, the minimum is like 5 seconds for unique enemy, so you can use that instead if you want. If you roll that with like a Greater Ember. But because we're using Brittle, we want to be like hugging the boss, so we're not using that massive strike range all the time. You can use it, you're just gonna like, your crit chance, like, I mean, if the enemy isn't Brittle, we drop like a lot of DPS, because, well, this is also with Yoke of Suffering, gives us like extra enemies take damage kind of stuff, but it's a lot of crit chance because that Brittle Ground effect is being boosted by our effect of not damaging ailments in the endgame version. But that's kind of what we end up with. Before we get to the endgame version, like, things stay pretty similar. I don't know why this is moved around here. You can put Culling Strike on an Ice Golem earlier on before you have it on something that can trigger automatically via the shield. Put Culling Strike here. You can put more duration on Molten Shell when you have other sockets. Why this is like that, really. Have to have that hit. Ignore the fact I don't meet the dex requirement. Assassin's Mark is our curse, but before we go crit, obviously, we don't have Assassin's Mark, which makes cursing a bit weird, so this is just punishment. The only curse that's like really good early on is punishment, because we don't want anything that lowers enemy resistances, because we're gonna go for reversed odds to invert resistances. So we don't want to reduce those resistances. We can penetrate them. That happens after inversion. We just want to make enemies take increased damage, or we yeah. So punishment, which is still like, it's still a lot of like effective damage for it, just only affects them like half the time. But this is like good for like, especially when you're leveling and you need to like kill a Zaro. That final Izaro phase is the scariest, arguably. Like, I tend to, if I ever die to a Zaro because I'm bad at the game, it's in the last phase. And so at least, like, punishment, like, affects him for that whole phase, kind of. You have to remember this number. You always have, like, Foul Smite Tech, you have Tincture. Tincture does a lot. And this is DPS on like very like just like easygoing, like nothing special gear. So you can find other items and stuff to juice yourself up before you go crit. And the transition from non-crit to crit, compare trees. It's a very logical transition because you take all this stuff, the precise technique, there's this cluster here, which is really cool. You can take this really early on. You just have to have some source of fire damage, so you're either using Molten Strike for single target, or you have just like any flat fire mod on your gear anywhere. If it's on your weapon, just make sure your next upgrade has it as well, kind of thing. A bit more scary if it's on your weapon, but if it's on like a glove, like some okay gloves with some adds fire damage, or a ring, all you need is like any amount of fire damage. This is a great 5-pointer. 100% more damage. Not more damage. 100% increased damage. Bunch of attack speed. Don't care about the dot. But yeah, this is like, we just take off. It's a very logical maneuver you do, where you take off this whole chunk here, you pap here instead, and then you just throw this stuff all over the place elsewhere. So you take this stuff. These great crit nodes. That's your crit swap. And like swapping to this tree requires 27 refund. That's like, you don't need, not every single point is needed necessarily on the swap. And we've got settlers, we've got gold, Ruthless with gold again, so we have we don't have to use orbs of regret. We also have boats. What I found when I was playing settlers Ruthless is I never used gold to respec, because it had better value being invested into my city's operations and stuff. So I was just using orbs of regret that I was getting via via the boats. So I don't know. But obviously you can swap to this crit tree like relatively fast. Obviously this is like min-max and level 91. And I haven't included as many other progression steps. But like if you want to swap to crit early, but you can kind of figure it out for yourself by looking at like, this is like a like level 83 tree. This one's level 89. This is where you like you can work out the intermediary steps for yourself, and you should work them out for yourself because it's Ruthless. If you're playing this build in Ruthless, you can play this build in Bench League and just ignore the Ruthless tips and stuff. It looks great. But if you're playing in Ruthless, you should react to what you're able to get when. Be dynamic about it. Which might mean things like you might not take this, or you might take it off. You want to take this later on, probably. You might not take it as early as I do. But let's talk about these leveling trees. This is like I don't know how people tend to start duelists, but this is what I've learned to do, basically. The only downside with this, unless you can take like beef down here, we can allocate beef to the channel name. But unless you like go over here, you don't get as much strength early, which is going to quite severely limit your range of weapons. The whole point of these leveling trees is to make sure, if I go like skip forward a bit, you can notice that there are no weapon specific wheels whatsoever. And nothing's related specifically to one-handed or two-handed. I think that's optimal for Ruthless leveling, unless you're like really set on like using like axes somehow, because every time I have leveled melee or weapon-based stuff in Ruthless, melee in general, I mean if you're playing bow, you're just playing bow. With melee weapons, you have swords, you have axes, you have maces. And it's really nice to be able to use whatever works with your skill. I mean, for Frostblades of Katabasis literally just requires a melee weapon. I think regular Frostblades, yeah. Any melee weapon. Why is that now Frostbomb? Okay. So it's nice to make our tree in a way that we can use anything that drops. Obviously, that means you may want to take things like this, but you'll get some more strength later. For Act 1, this just biases us towards swords, but that's kind of fine because it means we get accuracy generally from those swords, which makes the precise technique rush, like, pretty chill and easy. You can... I have killed Brutus without taking any extra damage nodes. I say in the notes that your experience may vary if you're following this kind of strategy. Again, only take this when you have a fire damage mod. I'm hoping to get one. If you don't get one, then you can probably get like you just need some flat fire damage on a weapon or something. But it's Ruthless Act 1, you're not going to get much stuff. So if you don't take this, then you can just like go over to Master of the Arena. There's other, you can just take, you can't really take this as early because you're not like leeching all the time. It's not this node's not as good early on. You can just kind of path straight down here, maybe get Fangs of Frost earlier, an option. You just see how much damage this is when you don't have any other damage on the tree. Precise technique rushing is a drug. It's just nice to like get loads of decks and then click it, and then you have 40% more damage, and then you can take the 100% increase, and this combo is really nice. But the Act 1's the most like, kind of flexible on this. You can just like start going over here earlier, get this, get the strength, get strength here, go down here faster, get more life. It's going to depend on you as a player. I like to rush damage though. I'm not playing hardcore. In Act 2, I like to take a bit of life. Things get a little bit scarier. You can take this, get some more accuracy. You may not need to get this accuracy earlier, so again, you can kind of skip this for now. All of these trees are a bit over leveled as well, so bear that in mind. I tend to kill everything as I progress through the acts. So I tend to over level a bit. I tend to over level quite a lot. Sometimes. Your mileage may vary, depends if you want to try to like zoom around. For Act 3, the main thing we want to get is this. I'd prioritize this. If you zoom for this, I think you can probably click this before General Gravicius, and definitely like obviously before First Lab. And this is going to give you like this, and this should be all the damage you need with like any, like, again, we're using whatever weapons drop. If you're able to drop no decent rare one-handed weapon or two-handed, we're not taking any shield stuff yet, you can literally run any one-handed or two-handed weapon of any type. You've got to have something drop that's decent, and then you're like doing single target early on with Molten Strike or Double Strike and using like Frostblades for clear, or there's other options listed in the notes. You could mule certain skills, but then other skills like Molten Strike is nice as well. Like that doesn't require a strike. Strike, use your melee weapon, blah 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 blah. Yeah, Molten Strike likewise just requires a melee weapon. Whereas some other skills, like if you're playing Sunder, I don't think you can Sunder with swords. So that's more limiting. I should probably add that to the notes. You could mule Sunder, you can mule Volcanic Fissure. Those skills are all good for leveling with. And after taking this, I go over to get Unwavering Stance early on. I have been punished far too often for not taking this earlier on. Just, you know, and usually with this, you just want to take Iron Reflexes earlier as well. So you could delay this, clicking this, if your evasion's going to matter to you earlier on. If you somehow get like, oh my god, I got a really good shield with loads of evasion, you know. But I prefer to focus on armor. Obviously, we don't have as much. You only have so much strength, so the gear you can equip is gonna particular dex node. Again, work with it as you're based on the gear you're dropping. For Act 4, the main goal for Act 4 is to make, if we've farmed up Frostblades of Katabasis, we want to make it like feel good as a skill to run. So I would run down here and just get that melee splash, because that's the really gross thing with Frostblades of Katabasis, as I talked about earlier, is the splash shotgunning. We take +1 strike from that as well, which is going to make all our strike skills just feel way better. And you can take more accuracy here. Again, you may not need it. This is taken here for like insurance. I'm not going to map out exact expected accuracy levels per act. You know, read the tooltip. Act 5 is when I would start picking up Leech. This is when I find I'm usually doing enough damage for Leech to like feel like it's doing something. And you can also spend 2 points to get 1 rage on hit from here. You can change this later, like there's like 3 points to get Realm Rage on hit here if you just want to like go here and save on respecs, but we also want to take this early. We don't take it later, but it's like nice res early, and armor. I would take the Leech. Gladys Perseverance is really nice. Taking combo with that, because it's good generic attack damage. We don't have to be like, oh, I've committed to swords now, or I've committed to axes, because a lot of people do that and then they get the 2 rage on hit with axes. I used to do that a lot, but I don't want to commit. I want to be able to just, I want to drop any weapon and be like, oh, that's an upgrade, and it's a new, different weapon. So from Act 5 to Act 6, we're basically just doing this. Because Act 6, we should have enough damage. If you have enough damage for Katava in Act 5, you have more than enough damage for Act 6. You don't have to take more damage in Act 6, but generally think I take resistances to help us cover for that deficit we're going to have, the penalty and whatever, and we start taking more life. Because now we're gearing towards making sure we can do Cruel Lab comfortably. So again, I'm in Act 7, I'm taking more life and res. I'm just going to slowly make things more and more comfortable. This is also bearing in mind there's two ways to go about the ascendancy order, which I'll talk about I should talk about now actually. When we do Act 3, you can take Growing Accumulator to get the double and triple damage chance, but you get a less damage penalty if you're not proccing those chances, which might feel a bit jank in practice. Yeah, obviously it's a new ascendancy, but like I can't try it in advance. I can't like estimate it. That might be something I do with certain items to theory craft, but I think it probably should be fine, but it's going to be a bit more jank than just doing straight up damage. You're going to have these spikes where like you're like hitting something like less, way more, less. It's going to be weird. Also, the best gambler node is reversed odds, which is behind risky exploit. So you'd have to take minus 25% to all res if you want to rush reversed odds. I'm kind of thinking of doing that anyway, because the other part of risky exploit covers for that downside a lot. So half the time, basically half the time you take almost no elemental damage while leveling, which is pretty cool, right? But it still means we might just get bonked in one shot. But if our gear's okay, if we're doing well with elemental res on gear, then we can rush that. We don't even have to take damage from first lab. We can just take damage from Cruel Lab. Otherwise, we're waiting until doing Merc Lab to take reversed odds, which is going to make Cruel Lab hard. It's like, you know, like it's not going to take. It's going to make Merc Lab harder to clear. That's what I mean. It's like, which lab do you want to make harder? If you take Growing Accumulator, you're going to have less damage for Merc Lab than if you just ran Risky Exploit into reverse. So you know, it's something you just have to decide based on how you feel. Like, be honest with yourself when you get to that first lab and you say, do I take the penalty in normal lab, and then once I'm at Cruel, I'm going to be just doing massively more. I should emphasize just how good this is. Let's just switch this back. There we go. If I took off this node, I'm losing 38%. Where were we on the trees? Peeking into Act 7 here, taking more life and res. I'm very good generally in the first 5 acts of not having to take many life nodes and not dying, but again, your mileage may vary. Take more life if you find yourself getting bonked. In Act 8, again, I mean, there's a common theme here. There's a really common theme, but I'm like generally just planning to take my defensive nodes as I go through this, because I don't find that you need as much damage scaling through these acts as you need to start scaling your defenses better. That's what Ruthless leveling's taught me, like the last several leagues at least. Again, your mileage may vary. Here I just take this one node off. You can actually keep this on if you want to and just take more rage on hit, but like 3 rage on hit should be enough. This is where I take Veteran's Wrath. So instead of having rage be like a sort of bonus we can get up, because like 1 rage on hit isn't much, it takes a while and it's very quick to lose it. Veteran's Wrath here means we much more realistically should be on 30 rage when bossing. Well, 37 actually. 43 if we count. Yeah. We're taking the mastery. I think that's all. Is that all I plan to take? Let me just double check mine. Oh, and we take Inexorable. No, that's Act 10. You really don't get that many passive points this later on. Take this. We want to start getting Inexorable, just like, you know, give us some endurance charges, helps us be a bit tankier going into maps and stuff. Something you can get earlier. you know, like Fortify is like 20% damage reduction, free endurance charges is like 12, so I think Fortify is high priority. It's up to you. And that's what we kind of enter. We enter maps with this kind of tree. And notice that like our main, we're not taking like a crazy amount of like damage. Damage should be fine. The early mapping and stuff. And the first thing I would do is get this shield as soon as you can from someone who's like dropped it and doesn't want it. If you're playing SSF, obviously I never make guides for SSF. SSF players should really just work dynamically with whatever they run into. But yeah, this tree is basically to just emphasize that like between here and here, no, not that one, here. No, that's the wrong way around. Hang on. Go to Act 10. So this is like a switch that we do. I would drop these nodes because we don't care about the max res as much. Once we get more early res, drop these later on. Marry this up here. Probably take iron reflexes if you have enough any evasion like gear. Take block nodes. Focus on getting your block cap to like 65, 65. Again, while focus is growing defensively, we got some attack speed and acuity here. I'm even like I probably even like drop this stuff. I take one here. But the most important thing with like Ruthless is making sure you can level. I'd rather have less DPS and feel tankier than have a lot of DPS but randomly die constantly, because then you can't push levels because the XP gain is just slower in general. And this is a non-crit tree. Notice the leech tattoo for life leech. So we take a one. You know, before taking instant leech, there's just this 1.4 mana leech. Life leech goes here. There's other design space in this build for like adding other tattoos, but the attributes are all quite kind of important, so it's not like you can just like throw them away. The big differences between this tree and this tree are mostly the fact that like this tree here still doesn't commit to a weapon type. This is just understanding the fact that we're playing Ruthless and what we get is what we get. Whereas this tree properly commits to the fact like we have a sword now. Why are we playing sword rather than claw or a dagger and kind of thing? Why are we not playing White Wind? I mean, White Wind you can't run a shield, and we want to run a shield. Your offhand needs to be empty, otherwise you don't get the full bonus of White Wind. It's a good dagger though. It would be good for like anything else other than a guy who wants to run Iloava's Bluster to Savalin. Swords are great in a way that because we get frenzy charges versus uniques, we get a bunch of block from these nodes here, which is all the sword nodes we take straight early on. Ignore the dual sockets. Again, that's a fake dual socket. We want to take we get instant leech. When we're doing enough damage to like instant leech to feel meaningful, it's going to be a lot of instant leech hits with whacking packs. Attributes, no, take me if you need them. You don't have to. You don't. Block nodes, just marry up your block. Make sure it's like 68, 65, like 65, 65. I mean, this gives +3. That's bites. Fiddle around as well. Like I tend to like take some life nodes early and then drop them for other things. But feel free to keep the life nodes if you do, and then they get dropped later. So yeah, those are the trees I've put in this build just to like, they're kind of functional reminders for me of like where to go. There are different ways to take them. And then the end game. The big difference between, this is just like the general like I would like be playing towards, playing crit, and then like the end game just has a bit of changing around. This is like basically for when we get Svalin, we change some of these things around a bit. we drop inexorable endurance charge gain, and we go for a deflection endurance charge gain, because it's basically about as good. It's not as good when you have 65-65 versatile combatant block. Once you've dropped a versatile combatant and you're running Svalin, it's good, and you can take another block mastery. You got 2 block masteries here. And that +2 chance to... +2 chance to block attack damage here is really nice. Once we get our lucky effective block up this high, every little bit adds a lot of extra EHP. Which isn't like technically EHP, it's one of those things where it's like, it's block, so... This build is much more geared towards doing like things like simulacrums, where like block is really valuable. Not geared towards like doing bosses with big one-shot attacks all the time, you know, like PoE2 Arbiter kind of shit. Because since this is Settlers, again, one of the really good strategies I want to explore, probably doing again for a bit, is Delirium farming, where you do like 100% Delirious maps. You drop loads of... And this build should be really good at 100% Delirious maps due to the shotgunning. It should be really good. It should like blow up packs. And you get loads of splinters, you can sustain simulacrums. And simulacrums give you the orbs needed to sustain the maps, and the maps sustain this. There's like a whole loop thing I did last league with it on out of a similar build. That was my double strike gladiator, but that wasn't with Svalin. That was just with like lucky block being triggered if I block. It wasn't as good. Now I'm building around Svalin. It'll be even tankier and even better for this kind of content. There's a bunch of stuff you can fiddle around with here. I was messing around with this tree way too much. There's lots of like, you can look out like, is this better than that kind of thing. I don't know what you could drop to try to go clusters in this build. Probably like some of these nodes kind of things and stuff, but like also with like endgame, I was kind of going down to this, be like, oh, I'll just have one rage hit again. But I think functionally it's just bad. And I think like you want to consider rage to be a real multiplier in your build. You should be taking Veteran's Wrath every time. I don't believe people who just put one node here and then say, oh, I have 43 rage. You don't though. You just don't. Unless you have another source of rage, like it comes from war cries or something somehow, but then you're probably taking more of this stuff anyway if it does. As I said before, there's loads of notes here. I haven't like color coded them this time, but like it's not like fully exhaustive. There's a bunch of like pointers on stuff. These configs are mostly, I think they are all set up correctly. There's some custom mods. This is to average out like how much damage punishment gave me. This is just effective resistances from the risky exploit chance plus shield. It goes down to 50% in the endgame version. So I don't actually have 82 res in the build, but like I'm just trying to look at what my kit looks like. And obviously you can tell that like the actual max hit isn't like crazy high. Weakness of this build is if you fail the rolls, it's like D&D where like if your character, if you critically fail one roll and then critically fail another roll, maybe you die. But, you know, everyone plays D&D and that's always a possibility. No one says like, I'm not going to play Dungeons & Dragons. I can't enjoy playing Dungeons & Dragons because I might roll multiple critical fails and my character will die. You live with it, you know? It happens. But this isn't some kind of immortal, like, 1 billion EHP kind of character that can just tank everything. But it is well designed for stuff like simulacrums and busy content like that. Modifiers tick correctly. Double check I haven't ticked anything. When I was making this build and trying to make sure the hit chance was correct for like the crit version and stuff, I had like blind ticked the whole time. And I didn't have a source of blind. I'd misclicked it like several hours ago kind of thing, and I had to redo my accuracy calculations all over again. It was great. Yeah, this is what I'm really excited to play. If I sound a bit like more like slightly morose, it's just because I'm not like very well at the moment, but I wanted to record this anyway. I always like trying to like get my own builds into like the top 10 of the ladder, and I've often had someone else do it as well, so you know, I've good inspiration for someone looking to play this archetype. I don't think there's anything else to go over really. Also, there's a note up here if you want to find the guy who had the original. It was like a level 91 Frostblade Slayer. Frostblade of Katabasis Slayer. And I was just like, okay, I just use that as a skeleton, and now here we are. It's how I make most of my builds. I just find something on Path of Building, and I'm like, well, this person was doing this correctly. How can I do this differently, the way I want? And then like 15 hours later, I have a build guide. Yeah, really looking forward to the event in Ruthless. Idols sound like a really fresh idea for the Atlas endgame rather than doing the Atlas tree. I'm one of the weird people that doesn't care for the Atlas tree much. I think just in Ruthless especially, it's not great at the moment. It's not in a great state, but even in like regular, like bench league, normal PoE, I don't like it. I don't care for the determinism it provides, so I'm more interested in dropping random things and making me go, ooh, now I have a bonus for this because I killed that guy. That's dopamine for me, not like procedurally unlocking points and then be like, oh, 5 more points and then I get that keystone. You know, I'm looking forward to that. I'm not particularly looking forward to doing boats all over again, but at least they say they're streamlining it. But I am looking forward to this build having like much better like front-loaded damage. And for reference, like if you press all the buttons on the build, and this is like average hit obviously. But let's say I'm Val Smiting. So that's 8 seconds. Let's say I'm tincturing. Tincture does a lot. Tincture does a lot for this build. That's a lot of... I'm surprised it does that much. Makes me wonder, like... It's just like a massively increased amount of attack rate and a big chunk of extra increased damage, which we don't have that many. We have taming. I do wonder why this does so much and whether it's like broken. Bottle Faith as well. There we are. Aspirational DPS, but again, I've seen all these items before, so I'm sure we can get there. I look forward to getting there. By the time I'll have to stream this event, may be somewhat limited in the next few weeks, but I'll see what I can do. I'd like to do some streaming. I always like streaming Ruthless. I did not enjoy trying to stream Path of Exile 2 at all. Looking forward to them trying to fix that broken mess of a game. But yeah, any questions? Any corrections? Any gaping like Mr. Allocates beef? You are advertising a bait build kind of comments. Feel free to leave them in the comments. Leave a like, tell your friends, XYZ. Otherwise, yeah, that's all from me. Peace.